if you want to start, there's 2 ways to do it. You can look for swarms, or you can get a nuke. These are 4 people who are nearby. Pat McCaffrey is a member of our club, and he's also president of the Red Creek. Stephen Coy is president of the Mississippi Beekeeping Association, the statewide. He sells Russian bees, which are a little bit different than the Italians, the yellow ones. Some people like them, some people don't. You know, is it a Ford or a Chevy? Dwight Gunter, I have Steve's bees and Dwight Gunter's bees. Strongly recommend them. They're both very good bees. And Dwight is over in Lumberton, I believe, and Dan Allen is, Stone County. Okay, Dwight is in Stone County. Dan Allen is in Hurley. Dan is severely hearing disabled, so you have to communicate with a text or email with him. But he has, so he has very local bees too. Get your equipment. You got to get started. We've sent out, various places you can buy from. So you need to get that. If you're looking for a swarm, I got my first swarm the 2nd week of February. My first swarm. Now this year we had warm early January. Now we've had this cold spell. They may not come out till sometime in late February. I sent out a list of mentors by city. It was fortunate this year we had 1 person in every city. So find a mentor near you, call them up and find out where they live. I didn't put an exact address down. Okay, these are the people. Judy, who's our president. Fred was presenting last week. Dick Miller, he's over in Gaucher. I'm up there. Sharon, who's going to be presenting today. Bob Collins is presenting today. And Dale. Dale does not have an email address. He's over in Ocean Springs, but you can call him up. Next slide. This was, okay. So we're going to be talking about our beekeeping year, month by month, going through and what some of the things are. We're also going to start out with pests and diseases, things you got to watch out for, and Sharon's covering that. It's not all honey and roses. There are some problems.
Yeah, thanks for giving me that one, y'all. So Robert, this is my husband, Robert Gargiulo. He also gets a microphone right here, Robert. And here's a clicker. Let's make sure it's turned on. So welcome. How many people have been to all 3 sessions by a show of the hands? Yay, congratulations. Gold stars for you. Have you hooked up with a mentor? Have you all? Not yet. So today it's really important to either find somebody that you can call or check with, because we were talking before that now is the time to figure out that equipment before you go in and buy the kits, because they're much more expensive when you buy the kit because it's not really what you need. And I learned that the hard way because we bought the kit. So if nothing else, get with somebody to just, figure out what you need. And Judy can always answer questions. She's a great one. So anyway, we're going to get into inspections and, the importance of it. I think for those that know me, we are first year going into our 2nd year beekeeping, so it's pretty awesome. We're learning as we're going, but it's super important to have the inspections because you need to manage the health of your bees. If you've got to also, the growth of your bees is super important because you don't want them to get, so big that they've outgrown their house, because guess what? They'll leave you. So it's super important to also manage the growth of your bees. The production of your bees, see what their brood pattern is, see if they've got a lot of honey, what they're doing. So the production of the bees, meaning, what are they producing? We were very fortunate last year. Our bees were very good producers, and we fed them back all their honey. And I know people hate to hear that because they like to take the honey off. But the first year beekeeping, we were told to feed it back to make sure our bees had enough for the winter to survive on, because right now is when people are realizing that their bees are starving and it's too cold to get in there to feed a lot of them. So we feel, really fortunate on that. So you really have to know what's going on inside the hive. It's super important to know what's going on in there. Next slide. So hive inspections, and Robert will tell you this, every time I drive up to the apiary, we have two different ones, one in Gulfport and the other one in Perkinston, and I'll drive up before I even get out of the car, and I'm watching what the hives are doing, because if they're happy and they're going around, then I'm happy. I know that that's a good day in the apiary. Flight activity, there's a slide after this, and Robert will joke that you can see the bees doing their cleansing flights, and they have little toilet paper rolls with them. But I can tell the difference on what they're doing because I know my hives. And I've studied the outside of them, what they're doing, because you can tell a lot. Number of bees in the air, like Sunday, I was out, and they were all over because it was warm weather, and they were out doing their cleansing flights. That means they're going to the bathroom outside. They do not like to go inside if they can help it. So on a warm day like that, it got up, I think, to 60. I opened up the hive, the bottom part. Can you point that out, Robert, what I'm talking about? I opened that up and let them fly, and they're making this beautiful little cleansing flight. So then after, they finished up, I closed it back up so it wouldn't get too cold. But also you can see, what they're carrying in. Like right now we've got red maple that's in bloom, and we also have, what's the berry? Huckleberry. And so they're carrying that in like crazy right now. So we have those two things. I'm sure there's others, but they're packing it in right now. So that's a cool thing to watch what they're carrying. And that's outside of the hive. You don't even have to get in the hive. You can see that. Sit, get a chair, watch your hives. That's the coolest thing. Robbing. We had a frame that was, or a hive that was started robbing on that, and that just means, so I'm going to say this, my husband's Italian, I'm Italian through him, but Italians are notorious for robbing. They really are. Those little stinkers, they'll have enough food of their own, but they love to rob others. So you can stop the robbing by will you show them there, Robert, that little, there's a mouse trap one you could put on the front of it, or that one that he has there. So what you want to do is you want to stop that. You'll see a real frenzied activity, and you can see the bees they're fighting each other, and so you just cover them up, and you just tell them, behave, 24 hours, and then you can come out, so it leaves the other one. So it's, just important to notice a difference. So robbing, it can happen at different times, but you'll learn. I encourage you to just watch some videos and see that. It's not anything you want to have, but the managing the bees is you've got to be ahead of your bees so you can be proactive rather than reactive. Because if it's happening and you don't have anything to stop it, then you're screwed. Can I say that? Sorry, you're just like out of luck there. So what else? So disturbed ground around the area, the hive. You know, animals. We don't have a lot because we have dogs that we rescue, so the dogs are around a lot, and they seem to keep away the skunks and everything else. But you know, if you notice that you've got some activity going around, you'll want to figure it out because the girls don't like that. You've got to figure out what's going around. Too many dead bees on the ground. You know, something's going on. Are they drones? What caused it? We're going to be switching ours out in this next frame that you see. We've got bark that we laid down, but you can't really tell the dead bees on there, so we're going to change it out to white rock. So here we go. Here's a picture of my hives, our hives, and you can't really, there's bark and mulch around there, which was great because it kept the weeds away, right? But we're going to be changing this up a little bit to have the white rocks around there. And you can see, can you see that video very well where those little girls, I took it in slow motion? That's their cleansing flight. Can you see them? Little toilet paper rolls that they're dragging with them, yeah. And I could tell that was a cleansing flight, again, because I know the hive's kind of behaviors. That basically top cover that I have there, Robert, would you show them? I switched that out last Sunday because it's warmer now, and what we do, we put an interview cover, which looks like this, so that I can always see my bees, what they're doing inside the hive without disturbing them. I can also put a jar, a feeder on here, and then I'll put a box over that so I don't ever have to, if I don't have to get in the hive for inspections, I can just feed them that way, which is, I love the interview cover to look at it. All right, so there it is, the setup. What's the next one? So what do you expect to see inside the hive? You know, what's the weather today? Are they stuck inside the rain? Are they, right now they're confused because it's hot and it's cold. They're coming out of, they form a really tight cluster in the winter to keep warm, and right now they're coming out of that cluster. It's expanding, and so, you know, at least mine, you know, when it's a sunny day, they are out. I'm surprised at how cold it can be when they're still out flying, but they are. So then, you know, what is the season? In the spring, you need to have brood building. You need to know what that pattern for good brood, what it looks like, first of all, what's good brood. And, you know, for some of you that don't know, I didn't know when I got into it, I didn't even know what brood was. And so, let alone to look for it. But, you know, that's your babies. You're building your babies. So in the spring, we're having a lot of that, and I'll show you a frame on this next one. The summer, yep, there it is. So this one to the far left, those are little eggs. They're little tiny eggs in there, and those are about a day old. And the reason I know this is because someone told me that if they're standing up like this, the little egg in there, that's a day old. If they're going like this, that's 2 days old. And when they're starting to make their turn, that's 3 days old. And that's super important just to know, because then you know you've got a queen. You know you've got a queen that she's laying, and even though you don't see her, she's there. So that second one, that shows different stages. You've got the eggs, you've got the larva, and then you've got the pupa starting in that's royal jelly in there. It's kind of hard to see, isn't it? Can y'all see that? It's real nice and juicy. So you know that's what that white stuff is. So especially if you get into like grafting, you know, queens or something, you want to make sure that you do have that nice gooey stuff to scoop out. But anyway, that's how they're formed, and it's a beautiful thing once you realize to watch it, just to see that on a frame. The top one is it's just a different combination of brood and pollen. The last one is our baby bees being born. Yeah, go back to the baby bees. So this was fascinating to me when you can see that baby bee coming out and being born, and they just, I mean, they're hatched. You're making babies. That's amazing. I love that part of it. Okay, on to the next one. Sorry. And here's again just a beautiful frame of, you know, brood, nectar, pollen, honey. You've got the honey up in the far corner. Just a beautiful frame. Sure, baby. Get your microphone. Join in.
Can y'all hear me?
There you can.
If you take a look, you got your brood. And if you take a look at a frame, and we'll show you one right after this, you're going to have brood. Then you're going to have larvae, eggs. It's going to move out to your bee bread or your pollen. And on the outside, you're going to have your sealed honey. So that's what a good frame is going to look like, that pattern that you want from a good queen. So a brood frame, you're going to have larvae and stuff like that. You normally, some people may, but you don't want to take your honey from a brood frame. For one, it's very difficult because you have larva, capped brood, eggs, etc.
That's exactly right.
So this, oh, I want two. So here's typically what a good frame looks like. You can see in the center you have your cap brood. Looks like a rainbow. Just outside of that, I know it's hard to see on this one slide, but you're going to have cells that have pollen in it, bee bread. And then outside of that, you have your capped honey.
That's a beautiful frame right there. So anytime you can see that rainbow happening, then you know that is a beautiful frame. You want to open up and see that. Again, it's just showing more the frames. And I just like this because it's a pretty factor. So it's just all different types of pollen coming in. Last year, I guess the girls had just some beautiful, they had lavender, they had blueberry, just all different ones. And when you can see this in your frame, it's just, and think how good the honey tastes with them collecting that. So looking under the lid, are you looking for the drawn comb, Bear Foundation? Here's a Bear Foundation. I don't have any. No, we didn't bring any drawn comb. But drawn comb means that the bees have basically drawn that out. And if you have drawn comb left over from this year, you would want to put that in your frames because the bees have less work to do if they have that drawn comb in there. The Bear Foundation, this is triple waxed. So, you can get into, a whole discussion on the different waxing or even waxing it more because the girls like something to be able to work with. Burr comb is just anytime the bees have too much space, they will do some burr comb. People are big on, they'll tell you to get rid of that burr comb, to scrape it off. There are times, especially when we have the interview cover on, I'll let them have that because what I realized is that they're doing ventilation, and that's why they're having that. So there's a reason they do it, and sometimes they do it for ventilation. But like if it's on the frames here, you have to get it off because it'll stick there. So on the upper left hand, it's showing burr comb in between the space there, and that will just make a mess because they'll put honey in there, and then it'll, when you go to lift up the frames, it'll be dripping honey everywhere. The second one is burr comb on the frames, and you just take your little tool, and you just have to scrape that off because they'll stick together. We save all of ours. Yep, we save all of it. We have a jar that we put it in, and then you can melt it down. So you can also put it back on the frames after you use it, or there's a multitude of things that you can use it. We save every scrap of ours. Robert loves the wax. And plus, we have a neighbor that he's afraid of bees, so we save it for him, and we make him he builds furniture, so we give him the wax for a little trade there. The second to the right, I guess that right picture, that on the bee, that is propolis that they are bringing in. And that is the super glue that glues these frames so tight that you have to pry them apart. I think I told you in the first session, but for those that weren't here, my girls, there was a cockroach. It was a big cockroach that got in, and I couldn't get it out, and I was going out of town. Well, when I came back, they took matters in their own hands, and they glued him to the side of the bottom hive box. Glued him good. So that is what that is in there. That's propolis in there on that top one. I can't tell what that bottom frame is, Robert. Yeah. Propolis. Okay. Go ahead and talk on this one. Yep. Because that's the nasty stuff.
So in the upper left-hand corner, you have a bunch of bees, and if you take a close look, this is really bad. You have green arrows going to it, but can you see that's hive beetles, small hive beetles. When you have this many on there, it's pretty late. When you see small hive beetles, what you want to do is you want to, when you see them, kill them. So you're going to have beetles on the top. When you first pop it open, you may see them run to the edges. So kill all of those. Typically, I have to leave the ones that are on the top are the males. Female ones are down into your honey or into your stored reserves, laying eggs, unfortunately. And then just below that, on the lower left-hand corner, you actually had the grubs from the small hive
Robert's
beetles.
tapping himself because he normally has a laser, but we couldn't find our laser, so he can't point for you.
All right, so the larvae, when it gets too far along, when they get into your honey and stuff, they're going to slime it out, ruin it, okay? And what they do is when they go through and eat the honey, they actually release, I believe, a yeast of some sort, and it'll start to ferment. And you'll actually smell it sort of fermenting in there. If you feed too much honey water and it ferments in it when you're feeding them, that may actually encourage them to come. What you want to do is you want to keep your hives out of the shade and too moist. That helps to keep the small hive beetles down. A lot of folks will take a dry Swiffer, the ones that are unscented, put those on the top. The bees actually chase those into the Swiffer, and the small hive beetles get stuck. You can put mineral salt around the base of your hive to actually try to keep them out. The larvae from the small hive beetles will actually come up from the dirt and stuff. So keep it in the sun. Use the dry Swiffers. Let me see. Oh, actually, the oral guards. I forgot about those. What the bees will do is they'll chase the small hive beetles into corners and areas. You put a little bit of mineral oil in here, cooking oil, and the bees will chase them in here, and they essentially drown in this. And there are other, last week, they talked about the beetle baffle. That's to help keep the beetles from getting up in there. That's supposed to be very good. I've never used one like that, though.
And so you just have to figure out how to manage your hive beetles. Like we have one hive that for some reason the hive beetles are attracted to that hive. We don't know if it's that it's closer to a tree, it's a little more shaded, but we've got hive beetles there and the other hives don't have it as much. So, you know, again, it's something you have to figure out. Each hive is different. Just because they're in the same yard, they're very different. Yep.
So one of the things I want to add to this is for all the pests and all these diseases, a strong colony is going to be probably one of your best defenses. So you want a colony that has a bunch of bees. I believe a queen needs 18,000 bees to be a very strong colony. So your numbers are very important. You want a lot of frames that have a lot of nurse bees and brood on them. That's probably one of your biggest defense against pests and diseases.
Yeah, because the hive beetles won't take out your hive. They can't take out the hive. It's got to be kind of weak to begin with. So there's a problem when you've got them, you know, taken over. Something else has happened to cause that, most likely.
Okay, in the lower right-hand corner, what you have is, it's a portion of a frame. If you take a look, you're going to see like a couple of the cells that have silk webbing on it. That's a pretty good frame, but it has a wax moth on it. So if you pull a frame out and you actually see a little bit of silk going on it, you got wax moths and you need to start dealing with it. If it goes a little bit too far, it's going to be like up in the upper right-hand corner. So
That's not pretty. You don't want to see that. No.
And then one of the other things, when you store your frames that have drawn comb on it, make sure you store those with, is it paramoth is one of those, and keep them dry so the wax moths don't infest them.
But you don't want to see this on your frame. You know, you don't want to see that when you open up your frame. But if you do, freeze it. And a lot of beekeepers will have big freezers. Yeah. Yes. Yes. It's very, very handy to have that big freezer. Yep. Get there ahead of them. So bee pest, varroa mites, it's not a matter of, it's a matter of when you're going to get them. You're going to get them because 99% of hives have them. They're hard to see. By the time you start seeing the varroa mites on your bees, if you see that, it's too late. So the varroa mite, it would be like us having a soccer ball attached to us. They carry bad diseases, and it's just, you want to be ahead of that before. I think the count now is about, you want 3%. You don't want to have them load at more than 3%. And the way that you tell this is you do a wash with alcohol. I get the strongest alcohol I can. It's about 90% proof. You can buy it. Robert's going to demonstrate how you would do this humanely on a hive, because you want to have the bees fall in, because you need about 300 of them to get a good count.
So typically what you want to do is on a brood frame, you want to make sure your queen is not on there. And as it's loaded with bees, you'll just brush the backside and they'll fall into it. This is a useful cup in that it has measurements for roughly
You're not,
300 bees.
it's not on, baby.
So it has what's that?
There, now it's on.
So there's measurements for roughly how many bees are in here. You put alcohol in here, you put the cap on, you shake it, the mites fall through, and you can do a count on the mites. And you'll shake it 2 or 3 times. You get online, you can actually use a ball jar with screens, and they tell you how to make something along those lines. Another option is to use a powdered sugar wash, or what's
Yeah,
called
and I'm
wash.
going to tell you that I don't like the powdered sugar, because especially here in the South, and there might be other ones, it depends on you, but it tends to clump up. And because it's so humid here, it tends to clump up. And I just don't think that you're getting a quality mite count when you're doing that sugar wash. It seems like it's more humane to the bees, but if you've got them, you know, if you've done that sugar wash and it's not accurate, like I did a sugar wash because I thought, well, I have a southern sister that didn't want me to kill her 300 bees. And so I did that sugar wash, and it wasn't. I came back and did the alcohol wash on it, and it wasn't accurate for me. So, you know, again, you have to figure out what you want to do. But I think using this instead of a jar, we don't have that many. When I finish out doing a count, I'll just take this and put it in a quart jar. I'll label that Hive 1 or whatever, and then when I get home, I'll do my count. So you have to have a rotation of when you do them. So now we're coming into, you know, there's a whole time when you need to do them. Sometimes people only have to do it, treat 2 times a year, but some people treat 4 times a year. So we checked last year. We did 4 checks. So
you're going to do it now as you're starting to build up in your brood. Your mites are actually going to lay in the brood in there. They prefer the drones. That's why some folks who use it's called a drone frame, and it's a frame that the hexagons are a little bit larger, so it encourages you to build drones. Drones have what? Is it 24 days, baby?
yes.
Okay.
Yes,
And then you
exactly.
take it out after, 2-3 days, and you freeze that to kill all the mite larvae.
You know, it would be so easy if we just could use the Mite Away Quick Strips or the Apivar, and we could just use that same one all the time. But you can't, because they build up a resistance to it. So you have to alternate your treatments as you go along.
The other thing is get on the Mississippi State University Extension Service. They have a couple printouts. One of them is on managing mites, and it'll talk about the different times of the years to do that. It talks about the different miticides that you can use, as well as integrated pest management with drone things, thermal. I'm not exactly sure how you do the thermal side. You raise the temperature in there to kill the mites and stuff, but I'm unsure how to actually work that. But if you take a look at the Mississippi State University Extension, they have a bunch of different options. Some of the miticides that you use are bad. It gets into your wax and into the honey, and you shouldn't use that if you're actually going to be eating the honey. Other ones are actually safe for it, so there are different times that you want to use that. A lot of your pollinators, commercial beekeepers use formic acid very successfully, but you need to know what you're doing with that.
Yeah, and that's the time that you really need to, get with a mentor or get with somebody that has done it for a while, because I didn't know that I had to do different, treatments. I thought this would be great. I can use this easy, strip that I can put in there, but you can't do it because they build up the resistance. So, yeah, so you can manage them, but the best information you guys can get on that is to come to the meetings, because they always are talking pest and varroa mites especially. The next one, let's go on to tracheal mites. They're not common in this area. Now, that's what I've read. I'm not sure, but I've read they're not common in this area, so I haven't, researched it a lot because they're just not common. But they will have signs of a K-wing, and it's literally where their wings look like Ks, and they can't fly. They're not able to fly, and so you'll see them. It's important to know the difference between, though, the K-wings exist on bees that have fully developed wings, but sets of wings, they can't stay hooked together. So you just, I guess, have to figure that out, and probably other people are more familiar with that from different areas. And it's real common to get the K-wing mixed up with, what's the other one called, Robert? Just the deformed wing virus. So neither one of those, you don't want to have, but I haven't had any problems with it. And the treatment is, this is really, it's kind of up in the air as far as treatment with it, but what do you say, fumagillin? And menthol is what they say, but again, I couldn't talk to that because I don't really know. I would say get with a mentor and figure out for the tracheal mites. It does affect their breathing, though, and so the bees can't breathe. That would be a sad thing. And now Robert is going to get to talk about diseases in the bees. And you guys, listen, I want to say this before we go in. You're having all this information kind of thrown at you, and it's like pests and diseases. Like, why do I want to keep bees, right? But the thing is if you have knowledge before, then you kind of know what you're getting into to look for. Because otherwise, it's just going to be really sad if you get in there and you don't know any of these things. So it's not death and gloom. It's really good information to know.
All right, so foul brood sounds nasty as it is. It is foul, okay? So it's either going to smell like dead fish or it's going to smell sour, all right? There's a lot of similarities between the two different foul broods. I'll talk about that. You're going to have a spotty pattern on your frame. That's either a sign of a poor working queen or the foul brood that's in there, and that may be a combination of both. On American foul brood, and I do have a picture in the next slide, the larvae are going to change from a pearly white, we showed you that earlier, to a tan or a brown. And then the cap brood, if there is cap brood on there, will be concave, so it'll be inward. And then you'll have on the frame itself, it's going to be, instead of that tight pattern we showed you earlier, it's going to be like a shotgun pattern, is the way they describe that. Now, some of the differences between the two. For American foul brood, the larva is going to die after it is capped, okay? For European foul brood, the larva is going to die before it is capped over. So that's a good sign to tell between the two. Also, on European foul brood, the larva is going to be slightly twisted. It's going to look like they twisted up some versus be capped in and died. For American foul brood, you can treat it with terramycin for both of them. And what they recommend, if it's pretty bad, that you burn the hive. There are folks that say that you need to actually burn the hive, your boxes, the whole works. Folks recommend that. You can do that. Another option is you kill your bees, you burn your frames because it's very difficult, and then you can torch your boxes like Bob Collins was doing. You torch the inside to kill all the spores that are in there. So it is a bacteria that is in there. On European foul brood, it can heal itself, but what you need to do is stimulate the colony to start producing more brood and more nursing bees to actually do that hygienic properties in there. And one of the ways to do that is to give them a trickle of very light solution of sugar water, and that stimulates them to start producing more brood. That and protein, the pollen. And then also for the European foul brood, requeening it to get it producing again. Sometimes you'll have a poor queen. So as I mentioned earlier, a strong colony is one that'll be resistant to diseases and to pests. Next slide. I guess I'll do this. Next slide, please. So you can see on the top there, go one more back. You can see European foul brood, it is not capped over before the larvae die. They're brown, tannish, turning, instead of the pearly white, it is the brown spots that you see in there. American foul brood, it dies after it's capped over, and one of the ways you can tell for that, you'll see it caved in, is you take a toothpick or a wooden match, you dip it in there, and you pull it out, and if it has like a brownish, reddish taffy that comes back out some, that's American foul brood. Of course, it's going to stink too. American foul brood is going to smell like fish, and they say you can actually smell it even when you get away from the hive some. Chalk brood. A lot of times you're going to see this when you have a stress colony. So once again, a strong colony is very defensive against diseases and pests. Typically after a colony has gone through the winter, you'll have some issues with it. Chalk brood will affect it after the eggs have been hatched 3 or 4 days afterwards, and what you're going to see is little chalky, either white or sometimes black mummies, little mummies in each one of the cells. What you want to do is the bees will actually clean this out, but you can help them by taking the frame, tapping it on a hard surface until all the mummies come out to help them clean up the hive. If you have a frame that's really infected, you may want to pull it out. And then you want to requeen it. Next slide. And this shows you. So this you can see healthy brood on the left, pearly larva on that side, and then you can see the chalky mummies inside some of the cells there. Next slide. All right, sac brood. Sac brood is, it affects the larva. It's a viral infection, comparable to American and European foul brood. The larva is going to melt into that cell. It's going to get mummified. And you can see it turns that brown, shriveled up inside of it. For mild cases, just requeen it. For severe cases, you may want to burn and destroy the frame or the hive. Next slide, please. Dysentery, diarrhea of bees, okay? A lot of times you're going to get this after they've been closed up for the winter where they haven't been able to clean out everything, do their cleansing flights. A lot of times, sometimes if there's a lot of moisture in the food that they're eating, it's going to produce that fungus that gets into their gut. Early spring consumption of food with high water content. One of the treatments is fumigillin. I couldn't say it earlier, now I can't even say it. And there are some antibiotics. The treatment for the American and the European foul brood, I believe that's an antibiotic that now needs a veterinarian prescription for it. And they say that with this, you may see the bee shiver or shake at the entrance. You may see little brown streaks. So for you folks that are up north, you may see that. All right, other issues, pesticides, herbicides, things like that. Get with your local county and get a sign that says, please don't spray here, and then get on their list also. Herbicides, pesticides are going to be hazardous to your hive. And then you have robbing. When the nectar flow is low or we're in the dearth, bees are going to start robbing from the other hives. One of the ways, as we talked earlier, that you can prevent that is close it up for 24 hours. That seems to help. If you have a common feeding area, some folks will have a big 5-gallon bucket with sugar water in it for all of their different hives to feed from. Make sure that's like 100 feet, 100 yards from your hive so that it doesn't encourage them to steal from the hives. They're actually getting all their food from the central location. I know folks have their hives very close to each other. You may want to switch the direction that the entrance is, have one face north, one face south, or whatever. If they are starting to rob from each other, yeah, you probably want to close it up so they're not doing that. All right, winter. Going into the winter, we're getting out of the winter now, but one of your biggest issues with the winter is going to be starvation. You want to make sure that they have enough honey. Honey is energy for them to get through the winter because they need to keep their brood and everything going through the winter. So they need to keep that hive at 94 degrees, and that takes energy for them to do that, so they need that store of honey. If you see that if there's not enough frames of honey for them, you're going to feed them sugar patties, sugar, to allow them to have those carbohydrates to survive. Absconding. Absconding is different from swarming. Swarming is when they load up with honey and pollen and go to a new location. They're finding a new place to live. Absconding is they may abscond because they have mites. They may abscond because they have diseases. And then colony collapse disorder is another function where your bees just take off, leave everything behind. So you need to monitor your hive, see what's going on with that when it comes to absconding. Loss of your queen. It's hard sometimes to know whether or not you have lost your queen or not. What you want to look for is brand new eggs. You want to see that she's working, going through that. It's important to understand what the queen's doing. That's why you want to inspect the hive. When you pull your frames out and stuff, if you locate your queen, put her in a special cell so that you can protect her. You don't want to kill your queen. So always be looking for your queen when you pull frames out. A lot of folks will kill their queen accidentally. When you lose a queen, there's a good chance you're going to get what's called a laying worker. And one of the indications of that is, for one, the loss of the queen, but you're going to see multiple eggs in each one of the cells, or you may see multiple grubs, larvae in each one of the cells. And that's shown in the slides up here. So if you have a poor queen, the workers may start laying, or if you lose your queen, the workers may start laying it. They're going to be infertile, so it's going to be all drones. If you have a queen that's a poor queen and she's run out of the sperm that she has stored up, she's going to start laying just drones. Okay, and so the workers may actually start laying eggs also, which are all going to be sterile and all males. Next slide. And then we're going to get into the next presenter, which is going to be Bob Collins. Do you want to take a break now, or any questions? Thanks.
Okay, let's see. Again, I'm Bob Collins. I'm an apprentice beekeeper. I'm going to talk to you for the first 4 months of the beekeeping year on the Gulf Coast as it relates to down here. So what we do, we start off with December, and we have what we call the dearth. There's actually 2 dearths during the year. This technically is the way, if you want to look at it one way, it's the first one or it's the last one. Dearth is when there's nothing growing, producing pollen or nectar. And if it's cold in the wintertime, then typically we have a dearth. But I can tell you, I was in our hives on New Year's Day this year. They were bringing in pollen, they were bringing in nectar from somewhere. I have no idea. And there was brood. So it just depends on the year. It depends on where you are, depends on your hive, depends on the year, what's the weather and what's going on. And we know down here, weather changes in 10 minutes. We can go through all 4 seasons in one day. But there is typically, we count on there being a dearth in December. So at the start of the year, the queen may lay all year long in southern Mississippi. But like I say, if there's a winter brood break, the queen begins to lay eggs again after December 21st, which is the winter solstice, or the shortest day of the year, shortest daylight hours of the year. And this is when you want to start feeding them pollen patties and sugar patties, sugar cakes. And we can tell you how to make those. There's plenty of recipes on the internet of how to make them. You can buy them, usually for more expensive, more cost. But you can make your own for a little bit of work and make a lot. First year we made pollen patties and we're still using them. We made 52. And just because we lost some hives on it, we still have them. So you can make your own pollen patties and save yourself some money. And plus it's something fun to do together. So, yeah, you can freeze them. Yeah, we wrap them in, you make pollen patties, you put them on a wax paper, and then we put them in Ziploc bags and freeze them. So freeze them, take them out, let them warm up before you put them on your bees because you don't want to chill your bees. So you freeze them and you can keep them. And we've had some now for, 2 years? So, yeah. Okay, the things you need to do in December, you need to feed your bees if they need it. If you see they're weak or the brood is going down, you need to feed them. You need to do your varroa mite clean out, to treat for varroa mites using oxalic acid or formic acid. Also, enjoy your family during the holidays. Most of the hard work of beekeeping occurs in the summer when it's hot. But during this time, there's really not much to do. You leave them alone. If it's cold outside, you leave them alone. They like to stay inside, you stay inside. You just leave them alone. You can read up on beekeeping to learn new things for the next year. You can attend the Gulf Coast Beekeepers Association Christmas dinner, which was good and fun this past year. First one I'd been to. And if we can get it done again, we want to get that seafood, what was that, seafood casserole? Seafood dressing. For whatever caterer we got, it was great. So yeah, come to that. It's free. You come to that if you remember. So next thing, one of the treatments like we talked about was oxalic acid vaporization. There's some details here. I don't do this. Usually I prefer older beekeepers that want to do it and are more familiar with it do it. It's basically using a heater device. You put the acid in there. You have a way to get into the back of your hive because you don't want to do it from the front. Get a little hole drilled into the bottom board in the back. You turn it over and stick it in. And it drops the granules onto the heater. It flashes into a vapor, and it goes into the colony and covers the bees and treats them. Like I said, there's the directions. Like I say, it works better if the colonies are broodless. Works better between 35 and 50 degrees, which you got to do it on a cold day down here. And at night, you need to make sure all the bees are inside. You know, if you're doing it during the day, the foragers are out. You don't have every bee at home, so you've got to wait till at night. Apply it 4 times a day, 4 times at 4 to 5 days intervals until the hive is unless hive is broodless. So January, we have what's blooming in January is our camellia and hazel alder. And there's some representation of what they look like. Also, kind of late January, red maple starts. And as soon as red maple starts, flows on. Things to do in January, you need to order your nukes, packages, and queens that you need for the next year. I personally would say even do it in December because some of these people have lists. You've got to get on a list form, and once they've reached what they believe they can produce for that year, they stop taking orders. So it doesn't hurt to get on a list early, but January you need to do it by then. Order your beekeeping equipment so you can get it in, and on some of the warm days we have, you can start putting it together. You work on that, put them together, paint them. Inspect your hives. Down here, this can be the first comprehensive exam to actually remove combs and get a good look at your bees. We did this last Sunday. We had about 4 or 5 of some of y'all come out to our bee yard, looked in our hives and discovered we didn't have any brood. But I was in the hives on January 1st and I saw brood. I saw cap brood, I saw larvae, I saw eggs. But 4 weeks later, nothing. But we found the queens in both hives. So we started feeding them some pollen patties and hopefully we can get them going again. But that is important to do in January. January inspections, what are you seeking with regard to food reserves? Is there ample honey in the center of the hive and above the cluster? If there is, don't do anything. They're okay and can go on by themselves. If no, you move. If the frames on the outside edges are going to be heavier of honey, you take those and you change them for the lighter ones in the middle, closer to the brood nest, closer to the brood ball. That way they can get closer and get the honey. If they have to travel across cold frames to get to honey, they'll freeze. So you've got to, don't want to make them break the cluster. You've got to put the food close to the brood. Is there ample honey for getting into the next month? If yes, again, you do nothing. If no, feed the bees. Pollen patties. If it's warm, sugar water, but if not, sugar cakes. And you make that with a cup or two of sugar and about 4 tablespoons of water. Just make it up in paste, you put it out, it will dry and harden. And when it hardens is when they like that. So, next, January inspections. Are there any eggs yet? If you do, then you understand that brood rearing began December 21st. The colony will burn through the winter stores they have much more quickly because they use that energy on the bees. You know, you need to think about more frequent inspections and more food. If not, then is it not time to worry about floss of queen? Relax. Check again in another 2 weeks. So we're going to check again in another week to see if we have eggs going. Why do you feed a protein supplement? And that's what the pollen patty is. Pollen patties are the protein. It's natural fresh pollen can be scarce at this time of year, and weather is variable. We all know that down here. Protein supplements provide an uninterrupted protein source to support brood rearing. Like you said, when you put the pollen patty on it, gives them protein, that kicks them into starting to produce brood. That's when they know, like, naturally, if it was out and they were in a tree, as soon as they start bringing in pollen, they can start producing brood. Without pollen, they can't produce brood. So that's why you need to do it. Yes?
So even if you have an ample supply of honey in the hive, you still feed them?
Yes, need pollen patty, because honey or even nectar is the energy source. It's because if they've got to have energy to fly and then beat their wings and all that. That's the energy. That's fine. That's just like drinking, sugar water for us. It's energy, but it doesn't give us protein. So they've got to have protein. You can see, you can have a hive, you can inspect your hive that's dead, that every bee in it died, and you'll see their butt sticking out of a comb, out of the cells. That means you're drinking honey, they're in there, but they died because there was no protein. So a hive can die and still be full of honey. Just, they've got to have both carbohydrates and protein. So, but pollen patties. Pollen is protein, nectar is energy. You've got to have both of those. So, but yeah, the pollen patty usually has some artificial pollen or sometimes even some real pollen in it. You can buy, cans of pollen online. If you need help, we can show you how to do that. So, yeah. So down here, we don't have to, but you check for blocked entrances. That's if it's cold, or has snowed. It has happened down here, but you check for them in cold winters. You may find many dead bees on the floor of the hive or in front of it. Sometimes dead bees clog the entrance and restrict access to the hive. So you got to help them out there, just scrape and pull them out. In warm winters, sick bees usually fly away and die. They know they're about to die. They don't want to contaminate the hive. Bees are usually very hygienic. They keep the hive clean. If your bees aren't keeping their hive clean, there's a problem. But in warm winters, they'll fly away. Dead bees are usually dumped away from the hive by cleaning bees. You have your mortician bees pull the bees out, and they will fly away with it and drop it somewhere. So they don't want it anywhere near. Why does the cluster size continually decrease in the winter? Well, colonies can only grow when young adults emerge from capped brood, which again leads to pollen and protein. You should expect to lose at least 50% of your adult bees from end of October to mid-January. Got that cluster. It's about the size of a basketball, and it just can get the size of a softball and maybe a little smaller. But good thing is they usually will make new bees. In February, you have your spring TT blooming, your purple henbit, dead nettle, and eastern redbud. So down here, that's what's blooming. The thing you need to do in February, you need to be inspecting again. Existing colonies are expanding and to be ready for the flow. They're building up the workforce to get ready to go. So when a flow happens, those are old enough to go out and get the nectar and get the pollen. The swarm and supersede your cells. If they're going to swarm or if they're going to replace their queen, that's when they're going to be starting. You look in the hive, when I look, if I see a cup and I think everything's fine in there, I'll crush it. There's nothing in there usually, and so Sometimes they'll make a cup just to make one. But supersedure cells can be anywhere. Swarm cells are usually on the bottom of a frame. So you need to start looking. And you need to decide in February, are you going to split or are you going to prevent a hive, a swarm? So, like I said, a split is an artificial swarm. The colony has one goal, and that's to survive and to increase the population. So they will swarm, which is a natural split, but you can split it. You can take one hive and turn that into 2 hives. And the next year or the next fall, split them, both of them again. So you can exponentially increase your hives. And in February, when we're going to do this, you sample for your varroa mites, just like you do with alcohol wash. You sample for them. You sample, and then you treat. Sample again to make sure, and then go on. You live with it. You just monitor. And you're doing what you can do. You do the strips, do whatever you can, just to monitor and to keep up with them. For the second year of beekeeping, for February inspections, there had better be capped eggs, capped brood and eggs. If there are, you understand that the brood rearing is increasing. The colony will burn through the winter stores more quickly now, still. More bees equals more need for energy, more need for protein. So they'll need that. You might want to inspect more frequently. If no, you have lost your queen, you combine frames with a stronger colony, which like you can do that. We did that one time. We had a colony that we think lost the queen, and she was real weak. We took the hive. We took these off. We put a layer of newspaper there. We took the other box, the other brood box for the other hive, put it on top. Within 3 to 5 days, the bees got used to the smell of each other, and they ate through the paper, and then they were one happy colony. And that's a way, newspaper. Or butcher paper, just any thin layer of regular paper. You put that, because if you put them on top, they both smell different and they'll fight. And you don't want that. So you put the paper there to kind of let the smells permeate and mix together. They eat through the paper, and they're happy. There's a queen down below, they're happy. And you've saved a weak colony. It didn't have a queen and could have died. So, again, feeding a protein supplement. Second year, by the time you get to second year, if you do the 2 brood box method, like 2 brood boxes, bees like to move up. They move upwards in the hive. So by that second year, they are going to be in the top hive. The cluster in wintertime is going to be up there. So don't inspect them when the temperature is less than 65 degrees. So you don't want to chill them out because they got to keep that temperature, and it takes a while to build it back up. Second year, what you do is it's called rotating the boxes. Take the top box off, put it down, move the boxes on the bottom, put the top box down where the bottom was on the stand, and put the bottom box on top. And then they have it to move up again. So gives them some more room. You want to add some protein supplements. There's some a pollen patty and Honey Bee Healthy, which is a little mixture of amino acids and some natural oils that you can put into sugar water, and it keeps the bees healthy. Brian actually makes his own. Super Honey Bee Healthy. And he sells little bottles of it, and we have a bottle we're still using, and it works great. And usually a lot cheaper than that stuff. So you can make your own. Brian's a good example of that, so you talk to him if you need some of that. Commercial protein supplements. You got brand names: Global Patties, Mega Bee, Bee Pro, Bee Paul, Ultra Bee, MD, do-it-yourself recipes. Like I said, if you talk to 5 beekeepers, you're going to get about something. You're going to get 6 or 7 opinions. So there's plenty of do-it-yourself recipes out there. Just see what your mentor likes and kind of follow what they say, because if they've used it and they've tried it, if it doesn't work, we won't do it again. We will find something else that works. So using protein supplements, you place the patties close to the brood nest. You look down in the frames and you see where the bees are clustering. You put them right on top of that, on top of the frames. Yeah, you can also feed a light syrup, which is the 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 sugar-to-water ratio. That helps stimulate brood rearing. Gives them the energy to do that. But you got to be quick in cooler periods of time because you don't want to chill the brood nest. You don't want to give them cold. If it's warm enough for syrup, you can do that. That right there on the left is a in-hive feeder. It takes up enough space of about 2 frames. So you sacrifice 2 frames to put that in there, and they usually have like a little mesh, plastic mesh ladder. It's called a ladder so the bees supposedly don't drown in it. Bees still drown in it, so it happens. You're going to lose a few bees here and there, but they're making more all the time. But you put that in there, you feed it, and that way they don't have to get out of a hive to get it. They go right over, just right over on top, drink it, and take it back to the brood nest. A feeding table for sugar. Got a 1 to 2 or 2 to 1 syrup. You trickle that. It stimulates the brood rearing and comb building. Use 2.3 pounds of sugar and water to make a gallon of syrup. And for 1 to 1 syrup, 4 cups of sugar plus warm water makes a gallon. Keep in mind, you got to do not so much like 4 cups of sugar and 4 cups of water. It's by weight. So water is by weight, 8 pounds per gallon, and you got to measure the sugar out. 2 to 1 syrup for autumn. We'll do 5.67 pounds of sugar plus hot water makes a gallon syrup. If you see somebody at Walmart hauling around a cart full of bags of sugar, especially the big bags, they're doing one of 2 things. They're making wine or mead, or making wine, or they're keeping bees. So either one, both are good. So yeah, but yeah, that's the only time you'll see somebody hauling out big bags. And they do sell 25-pound bags of sugar at Walmart and Pass Christiana, I know for sure. There's alcohol wash. Use at least 91% rubbing alcohol for doing that. And when you do it and you shake it, you look up in the bottom, you count it. You know, you've got 300 bees in there, roughly. You should see no more than 3 mites. If you see 3 mites or more, you really need to treat. So 1 mite for every 100 bees sampled. There's never a way to treat of oxalic acid dribble. I won't go through the details of it, but it works good in the evenings when the foraging is already done. Apply 4 times at 5-day intervals. I haven't done that one yet. Here is another. Let me see. Can't see that back very well. It's just another calendar when to do. You sample end of February. Looking April, did it work? And after the sample, you intervene, and then did the treatment work is when you sample again. I know you feel bad about killing 300 bees at a time, but 300 bees out of, roughly 20,000? How many's in a hive? 7,000 per frame. So you can get about, 50 to 70,000 bees. 300 out of that is not that much, and there's more being born all the time. So you got to sacrifice some for the benefit of all. Yeah, I hate crushing bees. I hate killing them, but you've got to sacrifice bees to keep the rest of them healthy. Springtime, like Brian said, in springtime, 2,000 bees being born every day, because a queen can lay up to 1,500, 2,000 eggs a day. And that's a lot. So, drone trapping is when you have a frame like Robert explained. It has slightly larger cell patterns drawn on it. The bigger ones is when the queen will know to lay drone eggs. You do that so the mites prefer drones, and they will go into that, and you take them out, you freeze it, and you continue that till September. I don't have one of those yet. I haven't really played around with it. Don't know if I should. It's still one of the things I'm learning too. So, because our mites haven't been that bad, but if they are, you can try that method. The position of drone frames in a nest. Usually in the middle you have the 2 middle frames as worker, then there's drone frame on either side, then another frame of workers, and then at least maybe 2 frames of honey in stores in the bottom, if you're looking down from the top. That's where you put your drone frames. This is one of the treatments for mites. It's called Apivar, and you also hear one called Amitraz. They're the same. Apivar is Amitraz. It's a neurotoxin that has low residue. And I think the conventional wisdom was not to use Apivar while you have honey superzone. But didn't the FDA last year or so, Brian, didn't they come out with that it was okay to do that? But, yeah. I think I remember one of them came up last year and said, oh, now it's okay, you can use it. But we're still not. I mean, but the current beekeepers, just why mess with a neurotoxin that could get into your honey? It's just one of those things. Yeah, it's all right. So it does have a higher kill rate than organic acids and thymol. Some mites are resistant to them. That's why you don't treat with Apivar one time, and the next time treatment cycle you treat again with Apivar, you don't, because the mites can get a resistance to it. Like I said, there is a possible issue with residue time for metabolites. I'm not sure what those are. Other thing is the mite away quick strips, or MAQS. You can't use them above 90 degrees. And down here, that's a problem. They can be used during a honey flow. It's effective when you use as directed by the label, but it often kills your brood. So there's trade-offs to everything. You've got to look at things, read the directions, do your research online, and try to make the best decision that you think works for your situation. And talk to the other beekeepers. Like I said, all the beekeepers I've talked to are the nicest people I've ever met. They're willing to help. So, and they've done all this. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Just try to ask them and ask for their knowledge. So down here 90 degrees, you can't use it during the summertime. Or February you can, but sometimes it could be 90 degrees, who knows down here. In March, you have your black willow, your tupelo gum, and your blackberry blooming. And bees love the blackberry. So in March, what you want to do, you want to install your new bees, whether they're nukes or packages. Be prepared for swarms for established colonies. And it's also the month when bees starve most frequently, so you keep feeding them. You need to evaluate the quality of all the queens based on the brood nest. So you look at the brood nest, see what the pattern is, and if it's good, then she's fine. If not, if you see like a shotgun scatter pattern, then you may need to rethink or start thinking about re-queening. All colonies should be flying actively and foraging. Like I said, one of the best things is like Sharon said, you stand there. I'll stand right next to my hive, not in front of it, but right next to it, and watch what's coming in. Just watch the bees fly. It's pretty cool. Just have a lot of bees flying around you, but it's not going to hurt you. And but you look at the landing board and see what's coming in. See the pollen on their legs. And that's kind of, it's also very calming too for some reason. You can expect more stings during early inspections because they're getting antsy. They're defending their hive, so you kind of got to watch out for that. Nuke care. When you get nukes, if you're getting them from somewhere and you're bringing them back, you got to keep them protected and cool. I wouldn't necessarily keep them in my car or my or a truck or anything. Make sure their tops are strapped down, taped down, or whatever, and keep them in the back. Don't keep them in the sun. You got to keep them cool. Before you transfer them into your hive, you need to kind of let them sit there and kind of get used to the area. I've actually just installed right from transport right in and was fine for a year until they all absconded on me. Yes. Yes. They will have 5 frames, and so you just put 5 frames in there and put your others on either side. Yeah. Some people that sell nukes want you to bring frames to exchange with, but some don't. The cost will probably be higher. Some people say bring your own box. And I had to do that. Put my own nuke, and he put them in there for us. So either you bring your own box, bring your own frames, or sometimes you just buy the nuke box with the frames in them, and that's part of the cost. I think I've done all of them except swapping out frames. You install the colony into your hive box within a week of purchase. So you could leave them there. If something came up, you got back at night, you could leave them there and then come in the next day and do them. And you feed that hive until the colony is well established. Swarming is colony reproduction. That's how a colony reproduces, is by splitting off, and then the other set raises a new queen, and here you go. It is biological imperative. They have to do it. That's why you do splits, to make them think they're doing it. When they swarm, they decrease the honey production for the year, but it increases the number of colonies. So next year's honey, if you can catch that swarm. Keep empty hive equipment available for capturing swarms. I've got to make up my go kit because our pastor LaRue, he calls, hey, you want some free bees? Because somebody called him. I was like, yeah. So I got my stuff together and it turned out, they were wasps. And he said, the people that call these in, they don't know the difference between bees or wasps. And but by the time he found out what they were, he told me, don't come. So, yeah. What? No, we don't want free wasps. I would burn it. But you have people calling all the time. I got bees. You get there and they're wasps. And then you just tell them, nothing I can do, sorry. Yeah. You just need to keep that empty equipment, like at least one box, bottom board, inner cover, outer cover, and that's, and some frames. There's your quality of brood pattern we were talking about. That is a pretty frame. I don't see a lot of honey. I see a lot of bee bread. If nobody's told you about bee bread, we've mentioned bee bread a lot. Bee bread is the pollen they bring in, but they bring it in, and they get the pollen, and it's stuck on the baskets on their legs, but they mix it with their saliva and some of their enzymes, and they put it in the frame, in the cells, and natural yeast starts growing. And in the warmth of the hive, it makes literally bread, a kind of bee bread for them to eat. So bees are bakers. Who knew that? So that's pretty cool. That's a good pattern right there. When you pull one out in March, April, you want to see that of the brood. So what if you do if old queen's a poor layer in March? You order a new queen. Dwight Gunter, the guy that was on the list for selling nukes, he sells queens. I've heard he has a good reputation for those. Order a new one. You keep the old one until the arrival of a new one, and then you do what they call pinching the queen. Just mash her. You need to make sure the brood pattern is not caused by disease. You pick her out because she's most likely not going to sting you. She can sting you, but she won't lose her stinger. It's not quite like the others, but she won't sting. She most likely won't. You pick her up by the wings, and you got her. And this is a queen clip. It's like a hair clip, but it's closed. Put the queen in there, and you've got her. I haven't done it. I haven't messed with my queens. My queens are fine right now, until the no brood thing last week. But I haven't messed with queens yet. You make sure your brood pattern is not caused by disease. You strengthen your colony by adding emerging brood from stronger colonies. Like I said, you got a colony that's kind of weak. You go to one of your hives that's really strong, has a lot of brood in it, and some that haven't emerged yet. Take it, shake them off the bees. You put them in your new one, and when those bees emerge, don't call it hatching. When they emerge, the other colony will accept them, no questions.
Why would you have two brood boxes and some have one? Why would you have two?
That's a whole nother discussion. What you see divert from my topic here. When you look at catalogs or pictures of bee hives, you see the two brood boxes, you see the little honey super on top, right? The catalogs want to sell you those two brood boxes, and that's our pastor and others. I'm going to record his discussion one day. He has an excellent presentation on single brood box method, done totally by math. He's counted the cells. He knows a queen can do 1,200 or 1,500 eggs a day. If a queen worked this one for this many days, she can fill one brood chamber. And having two, she can go up and fill that. But mathematically, I haven't heard his presentation. My wife says it. If she's a math person, so if it says it by the numbers, it's right. So, but you can have two. It's not that bad. I mean, I'm saying there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just. Well, like I say, if you come up there and bees are just boiling out, I would say it's time to split. Wouldn't that be? Because that's a lot of bees. It's time to split them. Yeah, that would be a swarm. So you do an artificial swarm, which is a split. But like I said, I'm totally going to single brood chamber at this point. So, and he's our mentor, so I kind of want to follow what he says. So like I said, we strengthen a colony by adding emerging brood form. Weak colonies can be combined. Like I said, we did that newspaper combine. That's what's called a newspaper combine, or just remove them if there's something wrong with them. March inspections, you do your regimented treatment for foul broods, and nosema is not recommended. Why? Because as of January 27, you now have to get a prescription from a veterinarian, a licensed veterinarian. I don't know if any down here are really familiar with bees to give us one. I would talk to Mississippi State Extension. They can probably recommend you to a veterinarian that could. The drug for nosema, which is the bee dysentery, is Fumidil B. It's hard on bees. It might be effective against N. serene. Guess those are. That's the name of the bees. Dr. Jeff. Oh, Dr. Jeff. So it's in Dr. Jeff's speak. Yeah. Dr. Jeff knows what that is. So, but he's a really cool guy. He sometimes comes to our meetings. If you ever have a chance to talk to him, too, he's a really cool guy. He's not a vet. He's Dr. Jeff. He is the apiarist up at Mississippi State. He's the bee person from Mississippi. So, yeah, PhD. Yeah, yeah. Book doctor, not a medical doctor. Yeah. So, yeah, yeah, entomologist by trade, and he mainly focuses on bees. He's up in Columbus or Starkville. Where is he located out of? I know Mississippi State Extension. I'm sorry? Oxford. Oh, he's in Oxford? Oh, Mississippi State's in Starkville. So, that's, yeah. Yes. Yeah. And he spends most of the time traveling around. So anyway, that's what I've got. One other thing real quick, going to talk to you. I know a lot of people here are from Long Beach, and that's good. And I'm glad if people here from other places. We have a friend that works in the city code office for City Hall. And after our first bee meeting, she said that she had more phone calls from people in Long Beach asking about keeping bees in their yards at their houses than she's ever had, which means we're having an effect. Right now, it's not allowed because bees are livestock. You can't have livestock in your yard. We're looking to try to change that. The way to change that is to talk to your alderman, your councilman, alderman, I forget what we call them here, but talk to them about that, times are changing. People are having chickens in their yards. People are having bees. And that's a way to get that changed, to maybe get an exception to the livestock law. So I'm just glad so many people ask about it. That's pretty cool. If not, I know we're probably going to do them anyway. So, yeah, just privacy fences. I'm not telling you to do them, just the law says no, but yeah. But yeah, so anyway, but I'm glad a lot of people have asked and are that interested to call and ask the city about it. But maybe that shows them times are changing too. So, but you got to talk to your alderman, talk to the mayor, talk to all these people. So next our presenter will be Brian Smith, but I think we're going to take a break and then do door prizes and then do your presentation. Okay, so take about a 10-minute break. Ooh, we're 12 minutes to 4 already. Will y'all indulge us to do the rest of the presentations? Okay, thank y'all. Take about a 10-minute break.
April, beginning in April. I'm going to try and work through these a little fast. So April, depending on the weather, it's either going to be March or April. You're going to be starting to work on your splits, find your strongest colony. You're going to make a split if, well, most everybody here is going to be new this year. So you're going to be getting your nukes and you're not going to be splitting. One comment about all this, everybody's getting these slides. I'm going to be mailing them out. And they're reference materials. So next year, you can go through month by month and figure out. And so when you're in December, you're going to be looking at January, February, so you're prepared. It gives you a list to prepare. Okay. So in April, equalizing some of the colonies, because they're going to be growing fast. One or two might not be growing as strong. Swap the frames. Shake the bees off, swap the frames. Just giving a boost to a poor colony. But you might want to note, because you're probably going to want to pinch the queen and clean that one, because she's not as strong as some of the other ones. April is the primary swarm season. If you remember way back when in the first one we had a graph that showed how steep the bloom was, all the blooms, the majority of blooms are in April. And all that pollen and nectar is coming to, and the bees are ready for it. So that's a primary, if they're growing really fast, they're bringing a lot on. So they're going to start wanting to swarm. And the way you take care of that is there's a couple strategies for preventing. So you're going to monitor for the swarm cells, look underneath, see if you see them. You can add empty combs to the center of the nest and add supers to make sure the box is growing and they think they've got more room to fill. There's several different things to do. As it said, split the hive and removing the queen cells. Splitting the hive. So this is one reason why you might want 2 boxes for a brood, because they're going to be split, they're going to be overlapping on the 2, and it's very easy just to separate them. Okay? And this is what they call managing the instinct. Let me get some of my notes here. The instinct is to reproduce. You want to take advantage of that. And use that to double, expand your apiary, double it. So you can allow the swarm to happen and maybe catch it, maybe not. You can postpone it by reversing the hive bodies, adding supers, and doing what's called checkerboarding. Checkerboarding is putting a super on with multiple supers. As you put before you put the empty one on, you're going to have honey in the first super. Take every other frame out. Take every other frame out and replace it with an empty frame. So now it's what you're alternating. We call it checkerboarding. And so the bees can climb up in one to get honey to the top, or the honey's in the bottom, alternating through. It's like a checkerboard if you look at it. And because they're doing that, they know that everything is empty. They know that there's not a limit to their honey band. Once in the normal hives, if they're out in a tree, they create a honey band and start filling that up to the limit of the space. You're breaking that up. You're trying to confuse them into thinking that they still have a whole bunch more room. And so each layer you put on, you checkerboard it with the bottom. I will send you some information, and we'll talk about it at the end. There's a gentleman who was in Mobile about 10 years ago and developed this technique for checkerboarding. He also talks about bees from a biological and evolutionary background and why some of these things work. It's pretty good. At some point in the year, the bees know the honey flow is dissipating. There's not as much nectar coming in. And they know that they can't swarm anymore. So there's a cutoff date after the swarms, and they won't build any more cells. Once you get to that point, you're sort of safe from losing them. So you're going to try and prevent them or delay them from swarming until they get to the point where the flow is declining and they're not going to try and swarm. So the queen excluder keeps, you've seen these, we've talked about it, it separates the super. It limits, if you're using 2 boxes, you really don't have to worry about it. If you're using 1 box, it does limit the amount that the queen can lay, but you can get almost 80,000 bees in the bottom box because there's 4,000 cells on each side of the frame. Okay, times 10. Okay, so that's 80,000, or there's 40,000. I'm sorry. There's each side. There's 8,000 on a frame, so that's 80,000 bees. but the bees need room for honey, and they need room for pollen bread, so they're not going to fill it up completely. So if they can fill up half of it in 2 boxes, 80,000 bees, that's a lot of bees. And the queen, can barely keep up with that. She can keep up with it in a strong flow, but that strong flow only lasts a few weeks. During the flow, you want to inspect weekly to stay ahead of the strong flow. You can put you can put 2 on at a time. If you look in the top and you see that there are 4 or 5 frames with honey, you can put another 2 on, because the bees will come up, and they may not be filling it, but they'll come up and clean it out, and they'll make sure it's all prepared. And you always see on the empty frames 3 to 6 to maybe 10 bees walking around on them. They're all cleaning them off and patrolling and that. But the ones that have honey in them have quite a bit more. They're covered. Okay, so this is a picture of swarm cells. The swarm cells are located along the bottom edge. The next supersedure, this is in the middle of it. The difference is that the queen, the swarm cells at the bottom are prepared ahead of time. The bees know what they're going to do. These are supersedure cells or emergency cells. They need a queen quicker. So they're going to find an egg and build this cell on over one of the current eggs and let the queen grow into it. So they gain 3 or 4 days on producing a new queen. That's why they'll build it off into the middle. It can just happen a little faster. Real quick, there's 15 to 20 different ways to split. The DeMarie method is a way to split that's a little bit safer, because if it doesn't take, you can recombine. You are splitting and having 2 boxes between them. And you expect, because of that distance, the top is going to start growing its own queen, and the bottom is growing its own queen. And once you get a queen capped, then you're going to take out all the other ones. If that top one gets the queen mates well and starts growing, you can move that box off. If your queen doesn't take, then all you have to do is remove the middle 2 boxes and drop it back down, and you have your original box. And you haven't lost anything that way. The double screen board split is one which is done in the springtime. And what this allows, the double screen is a 1/2-inch board with a hole in the middle, and there's a bit of like, you can use regular window screen or 1/8-inch hardware cloth. And you're separating the bees by 1/2 inch. So they can't touch and they can't communicate together because they trade pheromones. So you keep them from touching. But the warmth, the warm air and the scent comes up through the board from the bottom box to the top box. So especially in the springtime, that top box is being warmed by the bottom box. And they will create their own queen. And after that queen starts laying eggs, you can then separate the 2 boxes. Now, I use this method even in the summertime because I do my splits in August. So I have a fresh young queen ready to go in the springtime. This is a lot simpler, but it takes one piece of extra equipment. The Desmarais method doesn't take any extra. It uses the separation. Well, it does. It takes 2 empty boxes in the middle. You don't need a special board because those 2 empty boxes could be used for something else. So there's a lot of different ways to do splits, or you can just take the frames out, put them side by side, have 2 separate hives going. One may take, one may not. But they say your splits usually work about 80% of the time. So if you have 5 of them, and that's what happened to me last year, I had 5, and I got 4 good ones. One didn't take. So I just recombined it with where it came from. Okay, so the double screen board, Bob Binney on YouTube talks about how you do this. The first day, you split the brood resources with a queen excluder, and you shake all the bees down into the bottom box. Put the queen excluder on. You don't have to worry about finding the queen. You know where it is. You know it's not in the top box, it's in the bottom. Then, on the next day, you remove the queen excluder, you put in the double screen and add a deep box, an empty deep box with foundation. What that does is it lets the bottom expand for the next 6 weeks until you know the top one is as a good queen and she's laying, and then you can move it. Okay, and Bob Binney has a big, or he has a video that talks about how to do this, and this is the way I do it. It's really simple. You don't have to find the queen. You just shake all the bees off from the bottom, and then put a queen. It will keep the queen down. You don't have to worry about it. I do use, and what's nice is you have the empty box. You need to have that empty box there. So when I'm shaking off the bees, I shake them into that top empty box. Okay, and then they all go down into the bottom, and then at that point, the first day I have this. I use 3 boxes the first day, then I take it out. I use it like a funnel. How do you shake those bees off? Shake them into the empty box. Was that explanation too complicated? You have split the brood. The first thing you need to do is look at your box. If you have all your bees, pretty much all your bees and all your broods in the bottom box, you need to divide those 2 up. You need to divide the resources. You go through frame by frame, pull them out, look at them, and say, okay, this one is about half full. This one's half full. Okay, let's put that one in one box and leave that one here. And you go through each of the frames and try and equalize all the brood and all the resources, the honey and the pollen. So, and then you're going to end up with 5 frames here and 5 frames there. Now you're going to add empty foundation. So each one is going to be almost identical in what it has. But as you're splitting them up, you shake the bees down into the lower box, so that you know the queen is down there. Okay. Now you put it all back together. Put a queen excluder on, put this on top, close it up, and wait 24 hours. Now the nurse bees come up and take care of all the brood, all the larvae, and then the next day you go to this. You'll see I have comments in this. You don't see all the notes on these slides. I'm going to be sending your PDFs when you mail it, if you got the other 2, and there's notes on how to do this. So next year, you guys can do your splits. Or you can just come out to all the club meetings and learn how to do 2 or 3 other ways to do it. Okay, here's a quick picture. If you see on the right-hand side, one of those cells, actually, there's three of them, see in the middle. Those are, virgin queen has emerged and they've chewed down. Okay, so they don't need them anymore. Actually, the one on the left, you can see where the one long cell on the left, the side is not chewed off, the bottom is chewed off. So that was where it hatched. First virgin hatched. And then she went and stung and killed the other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So she kills her sisters. And then the other bees had just sort of chewed those cells down and used the wax somewhere else. But if you have 10 cells, the first one to hatch out, the queen will kill all her sisters, because you only want one queen per colony. Okay, May, we're getting into the clovers and some other, but it's sort of the end of the flow. What do? If you all will be having new colonies, you need to have a feeder in the colony. Okay. The way you know you can remove that feeder is when after you filled it up and you go back like a month later and it's still half full, 3/4 full, they're not taking the syrup. You can take it out. Okay. If they're draining it, you need to refill it. In May, you should have at least 2 supers on each hive. If you know there's a plant coming in, say mustard, someone planted mustard nearby a field, you know there's going to be a big flow, or some crop is coming in, you can put a couple extra on. Drone, okay, in May, if it's been 26 days, a drone takes 28 days to hatch a drone out. So on day 26 or 27, you need to remove that frame and freeze it. If you wait to 28, you're just growing a bunch of mites if you have drone frames. That's part of the integrated pest management, your drone frames, the green ones. So you can freeze them and then put them right back in, and you can watch those bees work. So Varroa in the wild, we are going to have there's a lot of talking about Varroa and what to do. Swarming does reduce the colony load. 60% of the mites leave with the swarming bees, but it still leaves all the Varroa which is in the cell. Okay, a brood break after swarming breaks the Varroa life cycle. Because if you read there, it tells you how many days from emerging the queen. There's 16 days for the emerging brood and 36 days before you get new brood. So there's about 20 days after a swarm because you have no brood. That's the time to use a medication like oxalic acid, because once they come out of the brood, all those mites will be on the bees. It's called thoratic. They'll be traveling around the bees. They can only reproduce in a cell on the larva. So when there's no brood and they're all out on the bees, that's when you kill them off. Okay. If you don't do it in a brood break, the life cycle of a mite is they will lay on a larva the day before it's capped. Since it's 6 days between the egg being laid and it being capped, okay? If you go to the 5th day, every 5 days, and poison everything that's in there, and you do that until all 21 days have gone by, you've basically picked up all the varroa that are coming out on all the bees. Okay, it's a matter of, so you have to be very careful about it, and you have to do it exactly every 5th day. Some people do it like every 3 days, but you got to do it multiple times, because there could, in order to get the entire life cycle of the bees. And so you got to be counting your days, and you have to be making sure that you do it at the right time. Okay. Oxalic acid, vapor, or drip. If you have something like the quick strips and things, you can just leave them in there. But if it's a oxalic acid drip or vapor, you got to do it multiple times. It's so much easier to do it on a brood break. You do it once, and you've got them all. Okay, in June, we have the Chinese tallow, the popcorn tree, and some of the cotton is starting to come out. Cotton is great if you can get to large fields, because it has all that nectar. I lived in Phoenix, and around the Phoenix area in Arizona, they had 2 big crops. They had cotton, and they had alfalfa. Now, alfalfa had the pollen, and cotton had the nectar. And they had tons and tons of honey there. The tallow will continue to produce well into June. Last year was really strange because they had tallow in July because it was so wet for so long. But many other areas will seize or stop nectar flows. Nectar flows will stop at the end of May in many places. In June, it gets hot. Make sure the bees have water, access to water. A little pan of water, something dripping, put some stones in it. But if you got ponds nearby, of course, if you have pools nearby. But I just have a bucket of water and put some sticks in it. They climb down the sticks, drink the water. July, we have soybeans, and we have sumac. Soybean honey is kind of irregular. They don't always go to soybean. It seems to depend on the type. The white flower rather than the blue flower. But from what I've seen, a lot of people aren't quite sure about it. It's not a sure thing. In July, you can slow down on your inspections. It says every other week. Well, if you're collecting your honey or harvesting in July, you really don't need to inspect that much. Only if you still have a flow, you might want to check. You'll notice on quite a few of the months it talks about medicating and as well as monitoring. July is when the varroa start a exponential growth cycle. They've gotten enough growth in the first several months, presuming they're starting from zero. The studies show that in July and August, they're more than doubling their numbers because they can lay 2 to 3 eggs on each larva. So they more than double their numbers. So in July, you really have to start looking at medicating and knocking them back. So let's see, preventing, controlling robbing and stopping the robbing. The community feeding will stop it. The robbing occurs because the bees can't find any nectar and they smell nectar. So if they smell nectar or honey in the hive right next door, hey, let's go visit it and take it. And once it starts, it's very difficult to stop. The only way to stop it is to block off both hives. It won't stop. The next morning, they'll remember that that's where they went. Okay, so you got to do it for at least 24 hours, because if you close it off, they can breathe. Okay, there's enough cracks in it. If you got the bottom entries, you don't have to worry too much about the air. And they have all those stores. They already have. So you're not going to kill them by closing things off. Okay, but they'll forget, because right now I'm feeding in a community feeder, and every morning they show up. They know exactly where to come. They remember where things are, at least for 24 hours. They do the same in robbing. They know that they came here yesterday, they'll go back in and try and rob some more. And they will rob out a hive. And when the hive is robbed out, those bees are going to leave. They're going to abscond. Varroa control. This was a timeline again. Reduction. In July, you want to do a sample and figure out whether or not you need to treat. And August, July is every 5 days you want to do it. There is another way that's not approved yet that uses Swedish dishcloths. Have you ever heard of those? It's a square cellulose fiber about an 1/8-inch thick, and they use them for cleaning. And you soak it in a strong solution of oxalic acid and put them in vertical in between the frames. If you go out and I know you'll have the link in here, scientificbeekeeping.com. A guy named Randy Oliver, who's a guru of beekeeping. He lives in California, and he's a biologist by trade, and he does all this bee research, formal, tested, with controls and everything. He's highly respected. He came up with this method of soaking the claws and putting them in and leaving them in for like 60 days. It's not approved, but it works. Okay, August, soybean, sumac, and cotton. It's getting close to the dearth, but there are some things going on. Continue some of the Varroa treatments. This is when I do late splits, so you can have young queens in the spring. As the boxes start to empty, you're going to remove them. Okay, when you've done your harvesting of all these boxes of frames which have honey on them, you put them back on the hive for 24 hours, and the bees will go in and lick everything clean, and then you can remove them and store them. And you need to store them, and we'll talk about that, and store them either sealed in a plastic bag, but you need to add paramoth or paradichloroethylene or benzene, DCB. You can buy it and you put it on and it evaporates and keeps. It's sort of like mothballs, but mothballs are naphtha. You don't want to use naphtha, even though you're killing moths. You got to use this other chemical, and it will keep the eggs from hatching. Because otherwise, and it's happened to me, you go in, you stack up all your boxes, and you come back a month later, and they're all glued together with silk, and there's no wax on anything, and it's a huge mess. You've just lost all your drawn comb. So you've got to be careful of that. And you need that comb, that drawn comb, because you're going to use it in the springtime. Put it back on. The bees just have something to fill right away. So that's something to worry about, but I got off topic, I think. Remove hive boxes as colony volume declines. Prevent robbing again. Something quick, and you can read this, but you might hear of Darwinian beekeeping. And this is with treatment-free. The people who say, okay, bees will be more healthy if we don't treat with chemicals. Our honey will be more healthy if we don't have chemicals in it. The reality is Varroa are killing hives. You have a choice. And no, there are a few types of bees that can manage the Varroa. Most can't. Varroa came with the bees from Asia. Actually, it didn't come with the bees. It came about 20 years ago. But the bees from Eastern Europe grew up with Varroa over the last 10 million years. But here in America, we've had 200 years of breeding bees for high production and gentleness. Well, apparently we've bred out the ability to deal with Varroa. Well, there are some people who are starting to do that, breed for Varroa hygienic behavior. So they know about it. And there are some people who claim that their bees can handle and live with Varroa. I caught 1 or 2 hives 5 years ago, and the next year I caught 1 hive. In the last 2 to 3 years, I've had no wild hives in the area. They're just not out there. 99.7% of the feral hives across the United States are gone due to Varroa. Okay, they're just not out there. All the swarms, they came from somebody who has hives. Whether it's big commercial operation, or someone who wasn't monitoring the hive and swarmed. Okay. You can try to do what they call Darwinian beekeeping, but the point of it is you're going to manage your bees. The bees that get Varroa, you kill the colony completely and start over. So you're constantly killing until you find a set of genes that it works. It is not leaving the hive to die by itself. Either it survives or not. Because if that happens, the first thing they're going to do is swarm and take all those mites somewhere else. Or they're going to leave them behind. But they're going to have a lot of mites, and they're going to grow a lot of mites. And it's called mite bombs. When a hive absconds because there's so many mites, they gift them to the wild, and everybody else out there gets a lot of the mites. If you're interested in treatment-free, do a lot of reading and research on it, and decide for yourself. But if you don't know what you're doing a disservice to the bees and to your neighbors who keep bees. So there's a couple pages on this, and it's underlined preemptively killing colonies that develop skyrocketing mite populations. So you can look at this, and there's some notes on where you can get more information. And it talks about this is the idea. Letting them swarm, using a small colony, reducing honey production, and you don't ever treat with chemicals. If you're just into this, even if you're into beekeeping just for a hobby, be careful about treatment-free. We would like to be there, and all beekeepers would, but we're not there yet. And I just heard that they developed a fungus that attacks the Varroa. They had this, I heard the announcement. I think, Bob, did you tell me about it? So just recently discovered a fungus. Who knows, in 5 years, everybody can just use the fungus and we don't have to worry about Varroa. We're not there yet. Okay, the dearth. September is the first dearth of the year. where we don't have anything blooming, your bees will be everywhere. You'll be walking outside on the sidewalk. You'll be going to the garbage can. You'll be backing out of the car. I had bees, had some telephone linemen come, and there were bees following them up, and they're everywhere. They don't have anything else to do. There is no pollen and no nectar, so they're going to be exploring everything. They might be coming into your house, okay? This is, the best way to take care of your bees is to feed them. Put a community feeder out there, put a bucket feeder or something. It's the best time to requeen. So you contact one of the people on the list for certified beekeeping, and you can buy queens. I take this time to actually split, and then those will be my new queens for the following year. I think you want to make sure colonies are at least 50 pounds. And lift up the picker at the bottom and try and see if it's about 50 pounds. That's with the equipment. That means there's enough honey in it to last. If you're replacing queens, there's a nice pretty one there. You can, number one, produce your own with your splits. Okay? You don't have to do 5 frames. You can use 2 frames of eggs and of resource. And it'll just be a tiny little lot, and they will survive. You can buy local, and we've talked about where we can get them. The large commercial producers are reliable, but it'd be better to get, they sell them in California, and they sell them from Florida. One of the criticisms is you're living up north, you're buying a queen that grew up in the south, they're not going to survive the winter. Around here, if you buy one from Florida, it's really not that far. It'll be pretty good. They're mailed in cages, and you can buy, commercial producers buy 50 to 100, 500 a time. But if you're just going to buy 1 or 2. And as far as that goes, Dwight, I went over to Dwight Gunter in Stone County, bought 1 nuke and 2 queens at the same time in little cases. And I've been very pleased with them. Okay, this is what it looks like. This is what's called a Benton cage. And actually, the ones I have are, functionally they're all the same. They just come in various shapes and various materials. There's room enough for a queen and several attendants, and then there's a hole that they put a plug of sugar, of solidified sugar or candy in. And when they're shipping it, they've got a cork in there, and then remove the cork, and they start eating the sugar from the inside and release themselves. That's one type. And here's another type. And it shows the candy plug. And here's the J's. This is a very common now. This was the ones I've seen. There's a candy plug, and the attendants can touch through and feed the queen. So you just slip that down in between the frames, close the frames up to hold it in place. And you turn it so the tube is pointed down. Because if it's either down, or I think you can maybe point it sideways, so she can at least be falling out. Okay, if you point it up and have it near the top of the roof, she might not ever get out. Okay, treatment. Give the queen a few drops of water put it in a cool place, install as soon as possible. So the installation, you need to give her time to get adjusted. Let's see, next, you remove the old queen 18 to 24 hours before introducing the new queen. Well, removing means finding her and pinching her. Cut out all, if there's any queen cells. So you want to make sure there's no, well, in the dirt there's not going to be if you do it in August or September. No virgin queens. It says remove attendants from mailing cage. I'm guessing that the queen is in a smaller container. Remove the plastic bar at the bottom, the cage to create. Okay, so if you look at this plastic, there's a little piece at the bottom on the left-hand side that points. So the attendants can go, that's a queen excluder. The attendants can go in and out and feed, but they can also feed through the little squares. But if you remove the bottom part, that's designed as a queen excluder. So keep, actually it's almost a queen includer, keeps the queen inside. And she's going to come out when the sugar is gone. Once she's out, you don't need to see the queen to know she's out and she's working. You just look for brood. Okay. And you know this in the springtime too. This past spring, we had, if you remember, we had a late freeze. It actually went down to like 19 degrees in the middle of February. And I had 6 hives. And I went out about and did an inspection at the end or the beginning of March. And 3 of the hives had no brood. The other 3 were full of brood. That freeze had killed off my queen, 3 queens. Apparently, she had been laying and she was on one of the outside frames and the temperature dropped and it killed her. She couldn't get back inside the brood nest to stay warm. So this is an indication at any time of the year. If you don't see brood, I shouldn't say any time, middle of winter, you will not see brood. But normally you have brood all the way up to December. Some years you'll have brood all the way through the year. But it's an indication, first indication that you're queen, what they call queen eggs. You have a queen. If you see eggs or larvae or capped brood. Okay. October, goldenrod comes out, strong flow. Sometimes you'll get swarms because the availability of pollen and nectar is increasing, and the bees think there's the summer coming, but it's not. A frost is coming. You have to watch out for that. We get goldenrod, and if it's really strong, you'll put on a lot of honey. I know some people like goldenrod honey. I just, whatever the bees take, that's theirs for winter, in my opinion. But the classic question at a conference, some newbie will go and say, okay, Dr. Jeff Harris, how much honey do you take in the fall? Or how much honey do you leave? And his answer is always, it depends. Well, on what? Well, one answer is the cost of sugar is 50 cents a pound, and the cost of honey is $10 a pound. How much honey do you want to leave? How much sugar are you going to feed? Honey is better. Honey has a lot of enzymes and chemicals and micronutrients that the bees need. Sugar doesn't have that, but you can put that in pollen. There needs to be a balance. Okay. I leave all the goldenrod for my bees. Okay, so October, that was October. Um, Fall flows, the fall flow ends at the first frost. Goldenrod is killed off at the first frost. And as I said, I don't harvest the honey. The cluster size, you're going to lose half of this cluster by January next year. You want to aim, so you need to plan 2 months in advance for getting a large cluster. As it says, 2 comb is going to rebound much worse than a 4 comb. How do you get to a 4 comb cluster in October? You make sure you're feeding in the dirt. And if you feed in the dirt, you know that they're going to continue to produce. And you can feed pollen if you've collected pollen in the springtime. Got to make sure you feed. At this point in October, you're probably going to start with sugar bricks or 2-to-1 syrup. 2-to-1 is difficult to make. You have to use hot water, because otherwise it won't go in solution. But you make it, you let it set overnight, shake it a few times if you're making it a gallon at a time, and it'll dissolve. But the heavy syrup will be stored almost like honey. It doesn't need to be evaporated very much. Okay, that's if you use a sugar brick, or they call it mountain camp sugar, and it's a piece of newspaper, and you pour sugar on it, just dry powdered or dry crystalline sugar. The advantage is that sugar, being loose, will absorb moisture and crust a little bit. The disadvantage is as the bees eat through the newspaper that's sitting on, it sometimes will fall off or go down to the bottom of the hive, and they'll pick it out. So there's a certain amount of wastage when you have powder. I like making sugar bricks because I get to put honeybee healthy mixed in with the sugar bricks, so they get a little bit of that nutrition all year long, or all winter long. And the sugar bricks aren't big. I use a pound at a time. I make a 2-pound brick, cut it in half, and feed it to them. November, the asters usually come out in November, and so the bees collect some pollen and honey from that for food. Continue till feeding if necessary. I don't feed every day, but every couple of weeks I'll put some out there just to keep them interested. A final varroa clean out. You know you're going to have a brood break in November, or you think you're going to have it. You could start preparing for that. Use cold days. This is something. So my hives are out on the edge of a forest line, and I get all sorts of weeds growing up. And the bees do not like my mower. In fact, I had a friend who was mowing. He put on his suit, and the bees absconded. They didn't like him coming by and mowing every 3 or 4 weeks. So if it's cold, you got a chance. They're all inside. They come. I've been told that they come out and start feeding at 50. This morning it was 48, and there were bees out there. So in the last couple mornings, once it gets to 48, the scout bees come out and they start feeding. The other thing to do in November is enjoy Thanksgiving. You don't have to be out there working with the girls. Let's see, what else do I have? I'm close to the end, I know that. Brood production continues in South Mississippi. I'm up in Loosedale. We're 40 miles north of here, somewhat east. I'm about a week to 2 weeks later than it is down here on the coast, as far as all the pollen and everything. so you're a little bit warmer. The last 4 years I've had brood production all year long, no breaks. I go in there in second week of December, and I still have brood. If you want to make colonies broodless, so you can treat for varroa, here's the way they do it. In Italy, this is a standard way to do it. They capture their queen, put her in a cage, put her in the hive. Okay, wait for 14 days. On day 21, you treat. Because there's if you look at when the bees hatch and when they're capped, there's a 1 or 2 day window in there that all the bees are either hatched or not capped, if you go by this. And that's the window you can treat for varroa. Because all the varroa are going to be on the bees, all be ferret. Okay. Let's see. Honey consumption by colonies. Okay. Brood rearing has the highest honey consumption, and you have to maintain. So anytime you have brood, the brood nest itself has to be at 95. Now the bees will generate that heat. They go head down into the cell and shiver their wings and generate heat from their muscles. When the winter clusters are tightest, I think that's what it means there. When the cluster temperature is about 43 to 46, that's when, if there's no brood, they get together and just stay warm. I think these slides are supposed to be hidden, but that's okay. You got to feed. Here it says temperatures are at least 40. I would disagree with that. I know they don't come out at 40. They don't come out much. They come out right at 48 because I've been out there monitoring them. Well, hey guys, it's been fun. Hope you didn't talk too much at you. We will send you. I will send this and all the other stuff by email, so you have it as reference. Thanks, everybody. Hope to see you again in a couple days.